no worries.
Cool. So from here on out, we're now recording. Welcome, everyone.
Cool.
Yeah, let's go.
Welcome to the people watching on the recording. So let's see if I can get this thing working. Great. So yeah, I'm currently working for How Might We. We are a usability company of a pretty small one, about 6-7 of us. I'm the lone developer. Everyone else is focused very much on UX. And what that's given me is an appreciation for people who are not like me. So as a developer, just because I know how to use it doesn't necessarily mean that other people know how to use it. And that's particularly pertinent with APIs. That just because you're able to hit some endpoints with Postman and get some responses doesn't necessarily mean that you've built something that is easy for other people to use. So this question of should you care? And actually, well, it depends. It depends because we've got 3 numbers in computer science: 0, 1, and many. So to go from 0 to 1 it's a massive amount of effort. To become a developer, that's going from 0 to 1. To build your first API, that's the same thing. To integrate with your own API, same thing. And if you're someone who you're consuming your own API, it really doesn't matter what you do. I'm not going to tell you that you're doing the wrong thing, or that you should use a different framework or whatever. Make that special Snowflake API however you want to. Do all these lovely things, and these are all things I've seen in production APIs. Creating things with gets, with query strings in the URL, and mixing around your nouns and verbs. So you're deleting a book by posting something to a URL that says delete book. It's really fine. And I think it's only once you're going from 1 to many that I think API usability starts becoming important. And that's around firstly, people other than yourself integrating with the API. And when you're starting to work with a team of other developers who are going to be building on top of this API, and at this point, maybe you are a more senior developer, maybe you're the person responsible for choosing what technology is going to be used, and how this thing is going to be developed over time, so that there's some longevity to this code base, and hopefully that you're learning skills that you can take elsewhere. But along the way, the problem with us developers is these kind of 2 big cognitive biases that make API integration difficult. So the first one is that we tend to overvalue something we've made. So we're like, oh, this thing is beautiful. And also, if it breaks, we know how to fix it very easily. Fire up a debugger, look at the endpoints, trace it through and be like, oh yeah, you're supposed to pass this thing and not that. So it's often quite quick and easy to fix a problem. But for somebody who's integrating with that API or trying to consume it, that's not the case at all. They don't know that. They have that distance, and they don't have all of the kind of mental models that we spin up when we're working with a code base, which is the second cognitive bias, which is recency bias, which is that the recency bias is when we tend to value something that we've done more recently than another thing, but it also talks to how familiar we are with using something, and if we don't keep that in mind when a new person comes along and goes, I don't know how to use this, you can kind of look at them and be like, oh, come on. And that's something as simple as when you're onboarding a new dev to your code base, do you have a README where they can get up and running without having to ask anybody? That's something super simple, but twice in this last week, I've been on board onto code bases and had to spend hours with other devs who talk me through like, oh, you've got to import this thing and then you've got to do this. And I'm someone who I very much value the 1 to n number. I want to make sure I'm always replaceable, that I can walk away from a project and I'm not taking sort of domain knowledge with me that nobody else has, or that's not in a README file somewhere. So yes, when it comes to APIs, when we're going from the one to many, an established convention is absolutely, it's helpful, and I'd almost say imperative. And no, just returning JSON doesn't count. And yeah, I guess I'm sure many of us have made APIs and also consumed other people's APIs, and think about how long that's taken to consume another API. When you know nothing about it. A few years back, I was asked to evaluate. As part of a team that was asked to evaluate music APIs, and we couldn't use Spotify, so we were having to evaluate a local one, who shall remain anonymous because I said a mean thing on Twitter to them, and then their CEO called our CEO, and I had to formally apologize. And another one called Deezer. So I went onto the Deezer site, and Deezer's still up and running, and you can go read their docs. And within half an hour, I had a working integration through JavaScript of the playlist that I could click through and play. API integration done. The other music provider took us 2 weeks to integrate with the API because we first had to sign an NDA, and then they had to email us a Word document, and the Word document kind of documented the API, but also it was kind of super out of date. And they were like, no, well, you just have to, click things until they work and try things. And yeah, it took us 2 weeks to get exactly the same amount of progress done. And unfortunately, we ended up going with the 2-week-long API. But that's something I keep in mind when building APIs for other people is, how long would it take somebody else to get up and running and build something meaningful with this without having to, trudge through a whole lot of very difficult stuff. The other thing I want to talk about with this 1 to n piece is if we think of these 3 numbers, computer science, from the API perspective, as a spectrum, with 0 to 1 being like, it doesn't matter, do whatever you want. The n side of the spectrum gets towards enterprise class software. If you walk into a financial institution, they don't want the 0 to 1. they want something that's proven, that's stable, that's highly secure, that's easily testable, that uses standards, and part of that is fear, for sure, that people, particularly technical people, don't want to be getting fired for technology choices that are not more standardized, and part of it is because enterprise software, and I'll show you some demos, some examples now, it comes with a lot of stable standard pieces, and keep that in mind when we start to look at the PHP world, and ask the question of how many stable standard things are there for doing things, or is it more along, okay, here are the 3 different OAuth packages I need to evaluate to see which one do I use. So the enterprise world often means Java. And Java is compiled, so we've got a lot of compile time checks, and is strongly typed. Compare that to PHP. So Spring Boot is is one of the big enterprise Java options. When I was placed at Old Mutual for a very long, very difficult project, all of the internal stuff is on Spring Boot, and they wanted that kind of enterprisey Java stuff. And interestingly, there's this thing called JHipster, which, even if you're not a Java dev, which I am not, I think it's a very interesting piece of software to check out. It is backed by Spring Boot, so that's the API side, built as microservices. And then the front end is your choice of Angular, Vue, React. But what's interesting about this to me is I first heard about this from the lead solutions architect at Old Mutual, who said that he looked at JHipster to figure out how they do things, because that helped him set the standards for the solutions software engineering with inside Old Mutual. It's a fascinating example of excellence in open source that's being used, not to build brochureware sites, which is fine, but being used at an enterprise level, doing some very, very serious stuff. And of course, enterprise is very concerned about security, which is a big part of JHipster 2 and Spring Boot, and it has all the nice, out of the box getting started with Docker things. So yeah, check that out. I think I'm going to figure out how to put these slides online at some point. But then to kind of close the loop in a little bit of a critical way with PHP. So PHP has often been criticized for, just being a very basic scripting language, but not something you'd use for anything serious. That's obviously changed with PHP 7, where we can now do proper object orientation with strong typing. And there's a nice blog there. But yeah, this is just showing that we can have an opt-in type system. And this means we can use static analysis tools, meaning that we can catch bugs before we run it. The advantage of a compiled language like Java is you can pick up your errors at compilation time, but with PHP, you're like, yeah, we pick up the errors when our users tell us about them, or maybe we pick it up in Sentry. So I've been using Psalm for a little bit, which comes out of Vimeo, and that's a really nice static analysis tool that picks up a lot of code issues, and that's made me a better developer. So this is an example of a strongly typed PHP class where we're typing properties, so we know what they are. If something is null, then we say like, hey, this thing's a string, but it's allowed to be null. This variable is a type of another class, and when we pass things to functions, we type them so that we can run the static analysis tool and actually pick up errors before having to run this code to show that we're not passing the right things through, and that in hooray, PHP 8 we get union types, so we can do an int or a float rather than just setting everything to mixed. So that's very cool. Compare that to how the most popular PHP framework is currently doing things, which is, I don't know why Tyler hates typing. I don't understand it. I'm sure there's good reasons for it. And just speaking personally, I left the PHP world after feeling that I wasn't learning things within Drupal that were transferable outside of the Drupal island. And for a number of years, I just did front-end dev, and I discovered Laravel, and it really did bring kind of the joy of server-side development back. It was very easy to do things, and the documentation is absolutely exceptional. I can't think of another system which has better documentation. But yes, I do. App models has entered the chat. Yes, that's true. So yes, I like Laravel, but also it's easy to do very weird things like this that I kind of shake my head at. So yeah, I think the stereotype that PHP devs need to be pushing back against is that we don't care about typing and we don't care about testing. So more of those things, please. I'm going to hopefully show how typing works with some of the APIs, and also show some API testing in this talk. So let's see here. Okay, so getting into APIs, there's a number of ways of structuring a JSON API. The one that stood out to me as the most popular, and maybe I've missed one that's entirely possible, but is JSON API. And the first time I took a look at the JSON API spec, I was like, that's far too confusing. And also, like, why is this so verbose? You know, you've taken a couple properties and you've suddenly made this massive data structure. Like, this makes no sense. And I only circled back to it when I was building an API. I'll actually show you a demo of that later, where the idea is kind of like an Instagram. You know, you upload pictures and then you have comments on the pictures. And so I made like an API/photos, and when I loaded up an individual photo, I wanted to know from that URL the links to the comments that were on that photo. You know, comment/1, comment/2, and as I started building that in, I slowly came around to JSON API. So let me open this up. So this is the spec for it, and basically what it looks like is a JSON API response is this this bunch of stuff, which I'll just unpack quickly. I don't know how many people are like super familiar with JSON API. Feel free to pop. I've got one eye on the text chat. Let me just format this quick. I don't think that worked. Okay, cool. So the core of this is the data piece, and in the data, this is what frustrated me when I first saw it. I'm like, this thing has a single attribute. You know, it's just title, and you know, what is the rest of the stuff doing here? And the rest of this is it's just metadata, but it tells a story. So it tells what the type of this thing is, the ID, and then crucially, and this is why I first started liking it, is the relationships between this node and any other nodes. So in this case, you know, it's telling me what the author is, and it's even giving me a URL that I can go to. So as a front-end dev, like, this is incredible. You know, I don't have to load up an open API or a Swagger or something. I just hit this API, and I can progressively discover things that are going on within this. And this included section lets the consumer actually optionally add things into this that are relationships, but instead of having that relationship at a different URL, you're saying, no, I don't want to make 2 API calls, just one, but include this other URL in this. And then there's some canonical links for where this is, as well as paging links, which is super useful, because if you've consumed an API that has paging links but hasn't made it explicit, then you either need to read documentation or get hold of a developer and be like, how does paging work? So yeah, that's JSON API, and the rest of this talk is going to focus on implementing JSON API in Laravel, Symfony, and Drupal. So within Laravel, you're really looking at Fractal, and Fractal is a really nice package that's been put together by the excellent people at the PHP League. So what this does is it allows you to transform a response and actually transform it into the kind of JSON API-like response, which is, I guess, a little annoying, because now it's on you to figure out, you know, exactly how you want to transform this response. But is useful, because this in the PHP universe, as far as I know, this is the nice way of doing this. So I don't know if I should step into, I have demo links later. Okay, it's fine. I'll find the demo link. Yeah, there we go. Great. So this is a local, this is the photos API I was talking about. So I made this API/photos, and let me see if I can open this up locally. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so here's my, here's photos, and currently I just have one photo. Hopefully this is large enough that people can see. And yeah, within this, I've got, you know, all sorts of things I wanted to add into it. And then crucially, the comments that are on here. So I can literally like click onto this, and it's loaded up an API/photo/1/comments. And when this finally loads, apologies, I'm on a MacBook Air, then it should load all the photos that come back with that. And that was a surprising amount of work to get right, actually. So apologies for people who aren't Laravel devs, but this is a model in Laravel. We've got the photo. I've defined a bunch of attributes on it. And somewhere in this, I've registered a route, the APIs. So I've registered an API resource, which is then coming to this photo API controller. That jumps through a bunch of hoops, but this is really what I wanted to get to. Let's get to this photo API transformer. Come on, VS Code. Okay, so this is my transformer, and I wanted to do things like nest everything to do with the camera with inside a specific property rather than having them on the top level. And this was a nice way to do this, rather than doing this specifically within the, say, like the toArray piece on the class. This felt a bit nicer. And the other piece that's really nice, so you can see that I've got this API transformer, and it extends this transformer abstract. So this is from league/Fractal. Yeah, so it's got this thing where you're able to define what includes are there. So I've actually said, like, yeah, I wanted to include the comments, which is a little bit harder to do from the toArray piece on the model. I actually can't remember offhand like how I would do that. So if I go back to photos, yeah, and there's the comments that are included. So obviously I can, hide that and refresh this, and then we have no more comments when that loads. But what I found interesting was that it wasn't the quickest or the easiest thing to implement Fractal. There was a bit of not so easiness getting this right. Something that did help, and I'll link to that later, was being able to rapidly scaffold out all of the API code. Actually, I'll talk about that later. Yeah. Okay, so that's Fractal, which makes something that looks much more like a JSON API piece. Let me just remember if. Okay, yeah, and it has added in all of the the links pieces itself, as well as the pagination, which is super useful. The one challenge I had with it though is that so now I'm on the comment for a photo, and if so comment is related to a bunch of other things. I made a new model called replies, and there's a likes model. So from the perspective of comment, I wanted to know, well, what photo does this comment apply to, and what are the replies on this comment, and what are the likes on this comment? And maybe I overthought this and did it a bit wrong, but I ended up having to manually map those routes to show what those were, because I wanted to show, from the photo context, where those pieces were. I might redo that in future, I'm not sure. I think if I were to rebuild this API now, knowing what I know, this is not a place that I would use Laravel. Okay, then the next piece, and actually I see someone's posted a Laravel JSON API.io package. Cool, that's great. I'll have to take a look at that. I wonder if that uses Dingo, because this I've come across in a couple code bases, which seems to be one of those like for people who are wanting to do APIs in Laravel well. This is a nice way of doing it. They've got nice, whole nice sets of functionality for it, and a pretty nice starter as well. So this this boilerplate is a really useful repository to start playing around with what a decently built API in Laravel might look like. So I spun that up yesterday. Let me see if I can find where that is. So much time. Okay, cool. So many tabs, so little time. And let me just see what I did code-wise with this. Okay, let me close that Laravel piece. It's interesting. There's only 2 times that I regret having a MacBook Air. One is if anyone asks me to run Docker, in which case I just spin up a VPS and run Docker there. And the other time is when presenting and doing multiple screens. So what have I done here? So let's look at this API PHP in our roots. Oh yeah, okay, it's coming back to me. So for those who haven't used Laravel before, a very simple, to just return JSON from something, you need a few things. So I've created an about us model, which I'm using in a couple different code bases. The idea is that this is an about us page, and it has, you know, a body and an image, and in this case a status, which should be an enum. And then normally this would extend eloquent, which is just this. Oh, come on! I love how you're not. Wow, it's actually been ages since I've been in Laravel. Laravel devs, which one is it? It is model, isn't it? It's just not picking it up in my file. Okay, and then we can actually see the database with some example content for this model, which I've done. So in my seeders, I've created an about us seeder that I'm not actually calling, but I'm calling this testimonial seeder. So in this about us, we've actually got a testimonial, which just consists of, you know, a person and something nice they're saying in an image. So when we seed the database, we create this about us page, and then we create this 2 testimonials that then link to this about us piece. And then there's a controller that we register in this root. So this just registers a root simple/about us. I've registered as an API resource, meaning that if we just do a get on simple/about us, it will then return, hopefully, simple/about us should just return. Oh, that is really slow. So I'll wait for that to complete. But yeah, that's just a simple kind of using a model view controller pattern. And then this controller, let me just open this up. And this code all gets generated. I mean, I actually wrote 2 lines of code in this class. The one was to just define for everything, just return the all. And then for a particular one, just show the about us. And wow, my memory is not happy. Come on. So if anyone wants to send some memory this way, that'd be great. Just see how I'm doing. I've got a crash report running in the background that is taking up 2 gigs. That's probably not great. Okay, let's refresh that. Okay, we're slowly getting there. Okay, sorry, let me reset this back to RESTful. And save and go. And hopefully at some point we do get a response. Okay, cool. So Yeah, that's exactly what I expected to see. And so yeah, this is the ID. We've got the body, we've got a header image, we've got a status, and then Laravel just adds by default a created at and updated at. And if we take a peek in the database, which I hopefully still have here, yeah, so that's all of that stuff. So that's just a simple API in Laravel. That's fine, but the problem is that in that API response, I've got these two testimonials that both link to that exact about us piece. So when I view this about us response by default, it doesn't actually show that there's a relationship there. In Laravel land, we define a relationship by creating a new name of the relationship and then saying, what it is. So I've got it there, but it doesn't actually show by default. So yeah, but I guess that's what Laravel's doing, is it's not prescribing how to do things. It's giving you just enough to get started with, and then it's really up to you to build the API from that. And this means needing to work with Laravel's ORM and see how it does things, and say, okay, yeah, we actually want to include testimonials. So we'll refresh that, and hopefully, oh, that did not work. Oh yeah, sorry, because I've only, so I need to do this for this ID, because I've only done this for this function, which is just showing a single version of this. So when that decides to load, yeah, so here we actually now have the testimonials included in the about us, which is what I want. Hooray! But also work. What else do I want to show with that? Okay, then compare that to how Dingo does it. So Dingo gives us, this is all auto-generated code, and it's auto-generated. I created the model through Dingo. It created the model through using Artisan. Artisan is like a command line piece that we can execute commands on. And the command for that, I forget what it was. I think it's generate API resource or something. It's on in the Dingo help documentation. So we've got this. Let me just open this about us controller. So this is where it gets a bit weird for me, because Dingo generated all of this code, and none of it's actually used. So I'm not quite sure why it's there. And it also forgot to define the model that it's actually using. So, and this isn't mentioned in the documentation. I had to spend a while digging through code to actually find out, why that is. And then that works nicely. So if I go to, I think I prefixed this with Dingo, and then about us. So now this is going to call the same thing, and now we've got a few other pieces that it's added in, which is quite nice. But you can see there's still no testimonial. So again, with Dingo, if we actually want this, we're going to have to use, Dingo uses Fractal, so we're going to have to create our own Fractal transformer that does this. Yeah, which is fine, but it's just good to know when using, when building an API in Laravel, that you're going to need to be familiar with Fractal, be familiar with transformers, and having to code those. Okay, what else do I want to show about that? Yes, okay, so that's that demo, that's fine. Let's see. Mac, yeah, good, as long as no one else is watching the screen. Yeah, true. Yeah, if there is, if there are better ways of building an API in Laravel, please share them in the chat. This is kind of the best way I've come across. I'm going to circle back to writing tests that you can run in your Laravel code base against your Laravel API in PHP unit a little later. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There is where's my special mention? A special mention, I've got the link on the slides later, but is to software called Enfion, where you can actually scaffold out pretty much everything I've just shown you from an artisan command. Just define your model and it'll then scaffold out controllers and even an admin backend. In fact, I'm going to show you that quick. And it got all the CRUD functionality. Oh, that didn't work at all. Probably because I'm on the wrong code base. Yes, I'm on the wrong code base. Okay, I'll circle back to that in a bit. Okay, Swagger. Yeah, it'd be helpful to know in the chat, how familiar people are with Swagger. But yeah, it's a very useful way of documenting an API. This is sort of the reference piece where it's not just documentation, but you can actually interact with an API. So you can literally go, let's take a look here. That's all posts, these are gets. Where is, oh, I swear it had like a list of pets here earlier. Or is this just gets a pet by ID? I'm just gonna look for a get all. Nope. Fine, add a new pet to the store. So yeah, what I like about this is it shows you the different content types, because sometimes APIs will support various ones, as well as, if I look at, let's take a pet, as well as the model type of what will get returned in terms of structure, which is super useful. And something I've never actually done but would love to is, and I hope it's up to date, but there is a way of exporting API integrations for front-end frameworks from a Swagger definition. So you can actually scaffold out an entire front-end integration without having to code it, and it'll map nicely to this. So ideally, what we'd like to do is in our API that we're building to create Swagger. So I have a demo of this. So this is Enfion, what I was talking about. I'll just open that in another tab. They are unfortunately not quite mature software. It was an interesting thing kind of walking through this Laravel ecosystem. Dingo's documentation is out of date. Things didn't work how it thought it would. If you have to go down to the level of having to read code to get sort of a hello world working, then things could be a bit better. So this is Enfion. I've used it only as a prototyping tool, but it's still super useful to play with. What I really like with this is that you can just create a set of database tables and then point Enfion at it and scaffold out an entire Laravel app on front of those database tables. So I've used this as a proposal for one client. We were looking at migrating away from legacy Laravel 4 app, and rather than going through the entire upgrade procedure, it was a case of, well, is there not a way that
So it's not just me. Roger's internet might have gone out there. I'll chat to him. Yeah, I think I know which Laravel 4 he's talking about, and some of us here might know which Laravel 4 he's talking about.
This is a really great session. Wow.
Everything has teething problems.
What is everyone actually mainly working with at the moment from a Laravel versioning point of view?
8, because we're cool.
Do we have any Laravel 6 or 7.1 still in the house? I've been really loving how the major versions are so seamless now. Like no minor updates required whatsoever.
I'm back. Sorry, everyone, about that.
Welcome back.
Who wants to trade fiber for microwave? Let me just pull some stuff out of. Oh yeah, I need to redo screen sharing, right? Yeah. Chat. Okay, cool. Cool. Okay, let me try to figure out where I was. I was on this code base. Yes, that's the one. Oh, did someone just make a PHP Storm joke? That's amazing. Okay, how do we do this? Oh yes, so this was spun up with Enfion, and all of this stuff was auto-generated and then integrated into Laravel. So let me jump into this composer file. So yeah, so this is the Enfion stuff that does all the generator things. And then it's also used this. This is the Laravel Swagger integration. It's used Swaggervel, and I'll circle around to that a little later, because most Laravel Swagger packages have been abandoned, except for one. But yeah, it's a bit weird. I guess it's hard. And then, yeah, the idea is that we can integrate exactly with this API using Swagger, which is great, on top of Laravel. Woohoo! So while that's loading, so how this works is when it scaffolds everything out, this is what a scaffolded out model from Enfion looks like. So it's added a whole stack of documentation to it. And then it's added these Swagger annotations to it, which you probably don't want to be writing by hand. I certainly don't. And I seem to recall, and I might be wrong on this, that there's 2 different kinds of Swagger annotations. I'm not sure if these match the ones that John sent me that we'll be looking at later. But essentially, these annotations are what the Swaggervel package scans the entire code base for, and then scaffolds out. Yeah, there we are. There's our success response finally, and then scaffolds it out into this. So yeah, I like the idea of having this on top of Laravel. What I don't like is that all of the stuff has to be maintained manually. So if if for instance, we come along and we actually, let's say, remove the body, we can't just remove it in one place and write a database migration for it that takes it out of the database. We actually have to then manually look for everywhere in this file that this is mentioned, and then take those out, which actually just turns out is one place. But you can see it's pretty easy to forget to do that. If you're reviewing a PR that someone else had done this, you could totally miss this. So this is where it's useful to pair this with testing, where we can start to pick up properties that we expect to be in a response, but aren't. Yeah. Cool. Docker Online. I don't know what that is, but maybe John, you could put a link to that. That'd be great. Okay. Yeah, I'm saying mine are the old ones. Yeah, I wondered about that. So that's probably because the Swagger package, yeah, this one that it's been using, that's been archived. Yeah, Swaggerval, a new one, is no longer maintained. Laravel Swagger is no longer maintained. So yeah, that's okay. Yeah, the Docker Online. Yeah, that's the same one that I'm looking at now too. Yes. Okay. So that's all the stuff in Laravel. And I wonder if I should show the API testing stuff now and then circle back to Symfony and Drupal, which actually I think I will, particularly because the code base we were just looking at is also the code base where we have tests. So firstly, if you're writing API tests, you have my respect. If you're writing tests at all, you have my respect. Testing in Laravel is very easy, and people should be doing it more. So yeah, let me actually show, let me come back to this. Let me show how this works. So, and again, I'd recommend the Enfion package. It scaffolds out these tests quite nicely. So this is, let me actually just, here we go. So here is a test, line 20 to 31. And this is firstly creating an instance of the About Us in our test database. And then it's actually making an API call. It's not making an API call against the production API. It's making an API call against this test kernel of Laravel that's been spun up just to run tests. And in this case, it's actually doing a post to this URL. Oh yeah, I should have read this before actually explaining it. So this this isn't actually line 22. That's not actually saving anything in the database. It's just scaffolding out some info. It's scaffolding out an About Us, essentially an array that we are then posting to this URL that should then create it, and it's scaffolded out this assert API response that just checks that we've got a 200, that there's a success message in it, and that we have some things like there's an ID in it and it's not empty, and that the data that comes back actually matches the response data. So this is nicely scaffolded out. This .json piece. So this actually comes from Laravel itself within the testing package, and I think that comes about because we've got this API test trait. That might be it. Actually, I was looking through this earlier. I can't exactly remember where this is. Oh, but we've got this base test case, right? Okay, that comes from there. So that actually includes that piece. So yeah, I mean, making a test request against your API is literally this easy. And what's nice about this is that there is some duplication in your code base in a few places, and it's a good thing. So the one duplication is that the exact route is duplicated. We've got the root definition here, and we've got the root definition in the API right over here. And the great thing about that is that we're essentially using the logic of double entry accounting, so that if we went into the API and actually changed this URL, our test would break. So let me show you how you run this test, and then we just actually run artisan test. In fact, I'm going to filter and only run this test. Actually, that's going to run both of them. So let me just say, actually, no, well, right. Okay. So I've created an alias for artisan, so I don't have to type PHP artisan. And when that actually runs, yeah, there we go. Cool. So it's run actually all the tests that start with that. So clearly there's 2 tests with that. And we also repository test. So if I came back into the API, and let's say at some point like a dev goes like, oh, cool, yeah, let's migrate this to version 2. But in fact, you have people using version 1, well, you're going to pick that up in a test. Your test is going to come back and fail because it's like, hey, that root doesn't exist anymore. And it's saying, hey, we expected a 200, but actually we've got a 404. So having these tests in your continuous integration is super useful, and you can get as generic or as specific as you want with them. So a good place to start is simply choosing what are the sets of URLs in your API that you want to make sure give you 200 responses, and then put those into your tests. Then you can get a little bit more specific. So this is a piece I added in earlier. So let me take that out first. Okay, so now this is a simple get. So we're just going to the about us URL, and then we're hitting it with the ID. Before that, tests usually come in 3 parts. We've got a given, a then, and a when. So the given is, our setup, which we're actually creating this and saving a mocked about us page in the database. Then we're grabbing the ID from that, and we're actually hitting that URL with a get, and then we're doing some things on the API response to make sure that we're getting the 200 back and all of that. So if I just run that, check, I can still see Nick moving. Good. So that means I still have internet. Cool. So that works. Great. But now we can get a little bit more specific. So we can actually look into what is actually coming back. So this response, the only reason it's this response is because in this assert API response, it's also accessing a this response, but this is all scaffolded. I'd prefer to pass as parameters, but whatever. So if I just do a response data, this DD will just output, exactly what's coming back. So yeah, this is exactly what's coming back from our test API, which would match the same thing as if we hit it in our API, wherever that is. Let's go to, about us. Yeah, here we are. So we've got success tree, and then we've got data, which is an array. It's an array in this case. In the other case, it won't be because we're hitting it on a particular ID. And then we've got all the stuff that comes back. So now we can actually do things like verify specific parts of the structure. So the Laravel's testing framework comes with this assert called a certjson structure, where you can actually part in the structure that you expect and assert it against the actual structure that's coming back. So I'm passing in the response data here, and then the structure I expect. And this is a bit weird because what's interesting is it doesn't error on things that you haven't included. So, obviously from here, we've got all this other stuff. This is only checking for things, do things that we've specified here, do these exist? So it's not an exact match. So if I, excuse me, what should I do? So if I said that actually we're expecting something like, I don't know, like age as part of this response structure, and then ran this test, and then we should get an error saying something along the lines of, hey, we've expected this piece and it's not there. Here we go. So failed asserting that an array has the key age. So not the easiest thing to read, but at least, you know, we've got a line number for an error that we can go take a look at and, you know, kind of work out what's going on there. So this is super useful. If you're wanting to kind of lock down the structure of your array, or if you know that you've got a particular API consumer that's expecting the structure, you could verify this. Obviously, there's other ways to do that. I mean, if you're using transformers, you could instead of calling the API, just do whatever setups necessary to transform to call that fractal transformer on the data, and then assert against that. But this method includes both. So, you know, it's really up to you, like what your testing strategy is and how wide you want the test to go. So yeah, I think this is super cool. And to extend this one more step, which unfortunately I don't have a demo for, but what I do have is a screenshot of a chat with John. So I'll drag it onto the screen in a sec. So what he's done, which is super nice, is worked out a way to validate the API response against the Swagger spec. Let's get the screen size right. Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so so firstly, John, I have to congratulate you on root access as your GitHub name. It's both painful and brilliant at the same time. So yeah, I'm gonna talk through this code as far as I understand it, and then I might ask you to jump in. Yeah, this is just some setup stuff. Let me just drag this so we've got a bit more. Yeah, there we go. Cool. This is if you're not Laravel, you don't worry. If you are Laravel, yes, this is really useful. So we're setting up a test database with some migration stuff, so you don't have to run the seeds, or at least when you do run them, it's pretty quick. And some helpful things like this act as user function, where you can essentially masquerade as a new user in your test setup, which is really nice. And then what he's done, and I'll show you, actually I'll show you that now, on his login model, I think it is. Actually, I'm not sure if this is on, if this sits within a controller or if this actually sits on the user model itself. But he has a bunch of that's what John highlighted. So, okay, so he has a bunch of Swagger annotations that basically define what's happening and what needs to be expected on a particular login, and that sits within PHP code. And then this test, here we are, this login test, this validate request function, I think that's actually the one that that checks that the request that's being sent matches the expectation from the Swagger docs. So yeah, John, I'll hand over to you if you want to add to that. See how much of that I got right.
Yeah, no, pretty accurate. Sorry for the bad code here, but yeah, 100%. So it does both the request validation, that the request matches what you were told on the Swagger it should be, and then also the validate response, which is quite neat. So with the response, you have to match it against one of your response codes. That's how if you look at the actual Swagger doc that gets generated in the JSON spec, that's how it's identified. Like that's the key of the stuff. Not on this side of the actual.
Okay, gotcha.
What the annotations build into, like what actual Open API spec have, that response code is a key So you can never have more than one response code with different types unless there is specific stuff there. You have one response and you'll say it could be one of these two different model responses in the response type. So yeah, basically then it validates both the request and the response against your JSON spec. What is really nice about doing it like this, as opposed to doing the array JSON structuring, is this does both checks. Because if you go back to the OpenAPI annotations, you can set required. So for example, if you look at that request body there, both email and password are required.
Yep.
And if you scroll down to the object that you'll get back, so that's the JHipster token you're going to get back for that login.
Nice.
You can actually specify which properties, if all, are required, which then does both the, if you receive anything that's not a property listed there at all, you obviously get an error. And if you don't receive something that's in your required list, then you also get an error. But yeah, I can probably do a little mini talk at some point giving a breakdown, because there's a lot in there, but it's probably more than we want to jump into today.
It'd be great to have, like an example Laravel repo that shows this annotation along with scaffolding out like Open API docs for that, and then a test for that, because that kind of fits both those use cases. That'd be super cool. Yes to that talk, please. Okay, let me jump back to yes. Okay, cool. So that's yeah, that's a nice overview of testing Laravel APIs, and please start doing it. Even if all you're doing for your first test is you're just making a GET request to a particular API, and you're just verifying that you're getting a 200 OK back. Okay, cool. That's a good start. Testing doesn't have to be perfect. It's getting into testing is really the hardest thing. But once you start writing them, yeah, it starts feeling quite cool. Okay, so that's John's piece there. What's the other piece? Yes, what did I want to show for this? Actually, I'll leave that open and come back to that, I think. Oh, right, yes, that's because I switched things around. Okay, let me do a quick thing on Symfony. So Symfony is something that I've always been too scared to try, and then picked up a project last year on it and spent my first 3 months really, really frustrated with it because I just didn't understand it. And now if I'm going to be building an API, that's going to be the first place I'm going to look, is on Symfony and on API platform. If you're going to start doing Symfony dev and you're coming from a Laravel background, don't just clone the code base and expect to use it. It has a very different paradigm and mental model than Laravel. Laravel is full of magic. Lots of things that to understand them, you really have to read documentation. If you try to click through the code base, you'll just be like, I don't know what's going on. You're going to end up looking at something that's an array, and you're going to be like, yeah, I don't know what that is. I mean, case in point, I was looking at, yes, what resource? Yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. So this is a good example. So this is, we're calling the root facade from Laravel, and now we're calling this resource function. It takes 3 arguments. The first one is a string, its name. Second one is strings controller. The third one is options, which is an array. So now you want to know, like, what do I put into options? Well, okay, don't know. Let's actually click into this and take a look. So now we've got, okay, so this is calling this function. Okay, let's open this pending root registration up, and let's go down to, okay, options. Great, that doesn't tell us anything. Okay, let's look at the constructor. It is options. Okay, great, cool. So figure out what options are. You literally have to search for this options in this entire file and find out the options are only, except, names, parameters, middleware, and you probably have to do a bit of reading to figure out what all these things are. So Symfony's approach is that there is no magic in Symfony. Everything is explicit. Everything is strongly typed. And reading Symfony's, let me just jump out of this back to reading Symfony's, I think it's called the Symfony book or something. It's free to read online. It is the best place to get started, even though it's like 20 odd chapters, just because it's such a mental shift. But after a while, it makes a lot of sense, particularly with their service auto wiring, which is just beautiful. At the bottom of the Symfony homepage, they've got the screencast section. And in the screencast section, there's this Learn RESTful APIs link. If you open that up, there is a whole lot of stuff in here. The first 2 courses are just good to know things about building REST APIs. The next section is on something called API platform. So API platform is this piece, is this thing. It is something that's built on top of Symfony and is super easy to try out. And just a thing of absolute beauty. I cannot recommend it highly enough. So if you go to docs and install, excuse me. There's a nice getting started thing somewhere with a Docker, excuse me, a Docker image, which I have spun up. I might have to go and grab some water in a sec. So yeah, I'm not running Docker locally, so I just spun this up on AWS. And it's, hopefully this is still working. Okay, I did an SSH tunnel, which I'm going to have to redo again. Let me just see if I can, no, not that one. Okay, well, I'm finding that in the background. Thank you for the water. What do I want to say about API platform? Yes, I wanted to show a demo of the documentation and also the testing. So let me just remember where that is. Close that, open tab number 300. So out of the 3 platforms, this was the only one that I got up and running first time without any issue, which goes to show the amount of polish in it. They've got a Docker Compose file. So you basically just run Docker Compose build up and you're good to go. And they've made some interesting technology choices here. So the one is that instead of using Apache or Nginx, they're using Caddy, which was the first time I'd heard about this. And Caddy is one of these like super fast web servers. And I'm using this in production now in a Dockerized Symfony app, and it works really nicely. Yeah, they're using Postgres here. I'm using MySQL, and then they've got this PHP service. It's fine. I've actually extended this to create a duplicate of this PHP service, one called PHP Blue, one called PHP Green, and then I wrote a small bash script that flips between them so that I can do 0 downtime deploys, which is super nice. In a demo I can do sometime. But what I'm actually looking for is my, and hopefully I've been smart enough to put that on a different screen so that no one can see my SSH file. Okay, great, there it is. Okay, let me just set up this tunnel again. Okay, cool. And that will hopefully, yeah, here we go. Okay, cool. So this is API Platform's docs. And this is just using the out-of-the-box stuff. But hopefully this is starting to look a little familiar now. And it's got some default values and whatever, and we can do this. What's quite interesting here is that we've got all these available formats. That is not just JSON API, but also JSON Hell, just plain JSON, and then JSON LD, which stands for JSON linked data. which is a very kind of a just Google that quick, kind of an alternative to the JSON API. It's much less verbose, but is really simple to read, and definitely worth checking out. This is an example of what that looks like. And what's very cool about Symfony is that so Symfony does all of its config through YAML files. I mean, you can use PHP, but YAML sort of basis is that inside this API platform YAML, you actually have the option of a whole bunch of other formats which you can enable and disable. And then depending on the content type header that you're requesting the API with, this API platform API will just respond with the APIs, the spec API that you've requested, which I think is pretty amazing. I mean, there's nothing I've seen like this in Laravel. Drupal, as far as I know, just does JSON API and GraphQL. So if supporting multiple different kinds of APIs, even XML, is something you need to do, then API platform is very worth consideration. And the other thing I wanted to show here was testing. Where's my presentation-y slides? I can go. Where's my link? Okay, so that was that piece. Oh, and the other really interesting thing about API platform is that they have scaffolded out an entire React admin backend that all it does is consumes the API spec and then spins up the CRUD components it needs to on the fly to interact with the API. Yeah, which I think is pretty interesting. What else did I want to show about API platform? Yes, it also implements, I'm not sure if they mentioned in the front page or not. It implements something called server-side events, which I've never used. And that's a replacement for WebSockets, and they work over REST APIs. So you could literally have your API consumers kind of be doing real-time eventing over your existing API, which is pretty amazing. And their Docker, yeah, like I said, their Docker thing is pretty cool. And they've also got a really nice way of, this is kind of a Symfony thing. But with Laravel, when you're creating a model, you need to first create the migration, and then you need to create the model, and kind of keep those in sync with each other. Whereas with Symfony, on the console, in a terminal, you add your model and you add your properties to it, and you define the data types, and you define any relationships and the type of relationships they are. And Symfony will create, they call it an entity, not a model, so they'll create the entity. And you can also create any migrations that you need to do, or you can just essentially sync the entity with the database, essentially force that migration, which I do all the time in dev. Once we're in production, I'll manually make the migrations. And it makes plain old PHP objects, which are really nice, really testable, very readable, play nicely with IDEs. Yes, the kind of thing that I would really struggle to put, sorry, Laravel people, I would really struggle to put Laravel in front of anyone with an enterprise eye, but I'd have no problem doing that with Symfony. So yeah, that's a bit of my bias. What else do I want to show? Oh yes, the testing with API platform. So there are two things I wanted to show here. So the one is that, sorry, I don't have a demo of this, but their docs are really good. So what I wanted to show is that with a a test, same thing. I mean, this is just PHP units with a little bit of helper stuff on it. It has the same piece here, you know, assert JSON contains, and then we're actually asserting this response that's coming back. I'm sure the assertion against a Swagger schema or an Open API schema that John demoed would also work fine in this context. So yeah, this having this level of documentation sort of as a first class, I guess, citizen of API platform is really nice. The other testing thing I wanted to show is this really cool testing syntax, which is actually part of the API platform's core module, I guess it's called. And it's writing this in, I think this is Behat. But it's literally writing, you know, human readable stuff and having the asserts against that. And that's super cool. So if this is something you want to dig into, just know that this is quite possible. To close the loop with with Drupal, which is kind of the last part of my talk. So thanks for sticking around so far, everyone who has. So yeah, I used to be a Drupal dev and kind of felt it was time to move on for various reasons. One of them being that I didn't feel like the skills that I had learned within Drupal land were very transferable outside of Drupal. And that's something, as I've gotten a little bit back into what's been going on with the community, that's been something the Drupal community has been massively struggling with for the last few years, as they've realized their coding paradigms and design paradigms are very Drupal-y and are very foreign even to PHP people. And so they made a major decision, which is, as I understand, been quite controversial in the community. Their decision was to incorporate more of Symfony components and to actually build Drupal on top of the Symfony framework rather than keeping it Drupal-y bits. So for someone like me, who's now familiar with Symfony and is circling back to Drupal and has just rolled out a Drupal 9 production site, that's been really, really interesting. Most PHP devs I know who've not looked at Drupal would not consider looking at it. And I kind of want to make an argument for now that Drupal 9 is here for actually taking a look at it. It has an absolutely beautiful JSON API, which looks like so. So yeah, this is an About Us node. And what's very cool about Drupal is that it exposes almost all of its settings, you know, with permissions that you control, but it exposes all of those via the JSON API as well, so that you could actually do a whole lot of decoupled admin. So yeah, hopefully this is looking a bit familiar. We've got these different sections, and in data, I've got this About Us node. Some of the Drupal paradigms will still come through in this, which is fine. It calls content nodes, so we've got an About Us node type, and then a whole lot of stuff with it. And the reason I've rolled out this Drupal site recently is that I had this project that needed to be multi-tenant, running on independent domains. It needed to have CMS capabilities, and it also needed multiple themes that could be applied to one or many of those tenant sites. And its CMS admin was actually written in Angular on a completely different site. So I've back in the day, I mean, I did decoupled Drupal sites using AngularJS, but that was the front end. And now there's, I mean, for years there's been a lot of movement in the Drupal community for decoupled front-end sites that use Gatsby to yeah, Stu and I worked on that project. That was a fun one, Stu. Yeah, there's lots of movement in the Drupal community for using Gatsby for decoupled front-end sites, which is a very cool idea. Also because using Drupal's theming layer is very difficult, but having all of that data served via GraphQL, which Drupal does very easily, is and then kind of put into something like Gatsby, kind of couples the best of what Drupal's good at, which is all the CMS-y stuff, with the best of, say, you know, Gatsby or React that works very well with statically generating sites. So I evaluated for this project, I evaluated Drupal, Symfony, and Laravel. I really wanted to go with Symfony because of its beautiful APIs, but I couldn't figure out how to do multiple tenanting and multiple sites on top of it. There's a Symfony distribution called Sulu, which is absolutely incredible. It uses the something called PHPSA, I think. Thank you, Star Trek. Which is actually using an enterprise standard that was popularized by Java for managing content. I was like, wow, that's amazing. Not even Drupal does this. And then I found out you actually need to run like a whole Java server, like just so that you can maintain versions of your content. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be doing that. But Sulu works with this idea of structured content that gets defined in XML schemas, which feels a bit weird, but also I really like that you're keeping your content structure in code. But in the end, this didn't do the rest of the things I needed. So nope, didn't do that. Evaluated Laravel, which could make it work with the API stuff. In fact, my first prototype of this was in Laravel with Swagger on top of it, and that was fine. But I didn't want to have to rebuild all of the CMS capabilities on top of Laravel. So I was like, okay, let me evaluate October CMS, and it was like, that feels weird. And I was like, okay, let me take a look at Drupal. So yeah, came back to Drupal, and have really been pleasantly surprised by it. I mean, sure, there's a number of difficulties with Drupal, namely deployments are quite hard. But once you understand that kind of Drupal's got this paradigm where you almost have to think more like you're going to be building things in a user interface. And then what you've built, once you're happy with it, you're going to export that into code, into a YAML file. And then you can deploy that YAML file to production. Once you've got that workflow in your head, then that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Stu's popping this on the chat. That's called Drupal's configuration management. Yeah, there's a couple gotchas with that, but once you've kind of got that sorted out, it makes it much easier to deploy Drupal sites. Still harder than Laravel and Symfony, because with Laravel and Symfony, you just deploy and then run your migrations, warm your caches, you're good to go. Whereas with Drupal, you actually need to do your deployment, then check if your configuration needs to be imported, then import it, then probably clear the cache, and then warm your caches after that. But in terms of creating structured content, it absolutely excels at it. So he has a whole bunch of structured content. So if I show you this about us piece, it's very trivial to add in all kinds of pieces like like a body field that has built-in WYSIWYG capabilities. The domain access module is what I've used for multi-tenancy. Drupal's had that for like, I don't know, 15 years plus. So it's kind of amusing to see, you know, it becoming a multi-tenancy being massive in the Laravel community recently. I think everyone Drupal-wise is going like, okay, yeah, cool. It handles images quite nicely. So what's interesting to note here is that as a developer, you're not you're not firing up an IDE and creating an about us class and then creating all these things. You're just doing this in the interface. And instead of using types, we're using field types. And then these field types can have image styles applied to them. And you can actually define like how you want an image to be cropped and resized. And even if you want to define a focal point on this image where when you're resizing it, this focal point must always be there. And then define responsive images on top of that, which is all stuff I feel like that's non-trivial. And Drupal handles that really, really well. So this is then the API documentation built into it. So here's the documentation for the about us content type. And I can kind of pick out everything I need from this, including the query parameters. So I can do filtering on it, I can do sorting, there's pagination, and specific includes if I want to include any relationships. So yeah, so let's take a look here. So some of these relationships, yeah, we've got a user relationship. So if I wanted to, I could include this. I also have this this header image with minimal info of it. So I can literally go like, okay, question mark include the field header image, and then that'll add this into my includes at the bottom here. Let's just find out where this is. Yeah, here we go. And then I've got a path to this. And something that should be working, and I did have it working, but somehow couldn't get it working again earlier today, is that I can actually define, I can expose the different image styles that I want here, as well as pass those images. So I think there's no default image style here, but I could literally say like, okay, cool, I want 3 different sets of image styles. I want a 2000 by 300 pixel image, that's one. And then I want an 800 by 300 one, and then I want a 200 by 200 square, and have those actually exposed in the API, so that the front-end devs actually don't need to actually think about different images. All of this is done and provided by the API. Now, I don't know if Laravel can do that. Maybe it can, but this worked out of the box pretty easily with at least the image style stuff, so I don't have to figure it out over the API. But yeah, Drupal really shines when it comes to any sort of CMS capabilities. And then to end off all of this is testing in Drupal, which I basically went, oh hell no. Let's rather do it with Postman. So yeah, you can do tests with Postman, which is very, very cool. So I'll do a quick demo of that. So here's just to show that I can do a request and get back the same piece. Let me just check. Yeah, I am on the prod one. Is that the right one? Yeah, it is. Okay, cool. So I'm getting back this response, which is what I want. But with Postman, you've actually got this test results piece. So currently I don't have any tests. So I can go on to tests and I can add a test for this and say, I would like, let's look on the right-hand side here. I want this to have a status code of 200. So I just clicked on that and then it's going to run that test. So next time I click send, here we are, test result 101, status code is 200. I can change that to, status code is 404 and run that just so you can see what a failed test looks like. Put that back to 200, run that. And then we can start doing things like, just like I was doing earlier, let's actually do a JSON value check. So now we're actually getting the value back. And let's take a look at our data here. So let's see if I can live code this. So if I do, so we've got JSON data, I think I might need to do a 0. Crap, I got this out earlier. Okay. What am I looking for? Attributes. So let's say that, let's check the value of what do we have here? Title, yeah. And let's say that that is about us. I'm terrible at live coding. Let's see how this goes. So that failed because it can't read attributes of undefined. No, that didn't work, did it?
Is your line 8 supposed to be on line 3 maybe?
Oh yeah, sorry, I messed that up. Thank you. Let's run this again. Oh wait, I messed up some stuff. Sorry, my copy pasting is not great. Yeah, there we go. I had this earlier. Can't just be straight.attributes, right? Because my body response, we've got a, it should be .data. And I think it should be data 0. Yeah, that makes more sense. Oh, cool, look at that, yay, passing tests. So I could also say that, you know, if that was just about, let's say, and then that failed. Okay, cool. So now I've got 2 tests, and let me save this. Yeah, sure, save and overwrite, that's fine. Against this, but what's nice when you have a whole collection is that you can right click on it and say run collection. And when you run that collection, it will also run the tests. So let's see what this does. Cool. So in this collection, it's actually run these 2 tests. And oh, good, I have another test there, which is great. And I want to take this one step further because you can actually run these tests in continuous integration. So if I export this collection, where's my export? Yep, there we go. And I'll export this into my downloads. Let me just, I don't like brackets, so I'll just get rid of those. Okay. And then somewhere I had yeah, where did I have that? Otherwise, I'm just going to have to find that folder again. So there's a tool called Newman, and I have this in my link here, right? And Newman is a command line tool you can install with npm, and with Newman you can execute a Postman collection. There we are, npm, and you can literally run that collection. So because I'm actually using an environment, and I have already exported that, which just shows the environment that I'm running with. So I can literally do, what's the command here? So it's Newman run, yeah, Newman run, and then I need my collection, which is this, and then -e, and then my environment, and this will fail because it's trying to run against a cert that is locally signed. See, it's unable to verify a certificate. So I checked this earlier, but I'll just SSL. You can just do a -k. So let me just run this again with a Newman -k. And it will go on and run this as if you're running it in Postman. Wait. Sorry, it's Newman run -k. And what's really nice with this is that this is a full-on integration test. You're not hitting a test database like you would be, you know, when you're running a test in Laravel. You're actually hitting the API that you want to test. So you could be testing your live API with this, and you obviously don't want to be, you know, posting content to it or doing anything destructive, but you could be performing logins, which might not be a good idea unless you've properly used environment variables in your continuous integration and on committing those to your JSON file. But yeah, you're at least then checking that everything is up and running. And this could save you a whole bunch of time. I know one front-end developer that every time he got to work, he ran his full Postman tests against the API he was meant to be integrating with, just to see if anything broke, because often they did. And then you know, he could just go to the backend devs and be like, hey guys, your API is down. And it's very easy to, you know, as you saw, to go into any one of these, excuse me, and just add a 200 OK test. Oh, there goes my voice. Okay, I think I'm done. Yeah, so Postman, very cool. Use it. Last thing, and then I'm done. So this is Andre's framework, and what I like about Tina 4 is that this is extremely, extremely light. I mean, if you go and look at the packages that it's included, it's absolutely tiny. And let me open the GitHub piece here as well. Yeah. Oh, my Firefox is dying. And what's great about that, because he doesn't have dependencies that include dependencies, and you know, kind of these layers and layers of code, it's really easy to understand what's going on, and it is blazingly quick. So I know he's been working on implementing the JSON API spec in Tina 4, and also including the Open API integration with it. And what I found interesting when he did the demo with me, so I hope he does it with us, is just how quickly he was able to create an API that returned responses kind of with very little code. The kind of stuff that I'm like, yeah, I mean, I can do this. But as he got more into his demo, I was like, well, I could do this, but this would take me a good couple hours. And like, okay, this would take me half a day. So the kind of feedback he's been getting is that as people are looking at this, they're really blown away by the speed that you're able to do things with. So even if you kind of just want to, you know, you got no plans to use it for production, but you just kind of want to play around and take a look at a framework, and kind of look at a different approach while learning some PHP along the way, yeah, I recommend this as a fun thing to play with. So yeah, that is now me. Thanks for everyone who's added stuff into the chat. Yeah, that Stu, that cache warmer project is super useful. I use that too. And over to you, Nick, I think.
Sure. Thanks very much. That was super in-depth, lots of stuff there. I know a fair chunk of us are Laravel people, but also a fair chunk of us aren't. So we need more of that representation. So I appreciate going into the Symfony and Drupal side, and even a bit of Tina 4 as a appetizer for the next meetup. So yeah, thank you very much, Roger.
Yeah, cool. Feel free to hit me up on the PHP channel in the ZATech Slack. I have added some of this demo code to the Laravel API boilerplate repo. If there's interest in that, I'll commit it and push it up. And also very happy to talk testing as well, because I think, like I said, the hardest thing with testing is to just get started. Once you've written your first test that calls an API, then you know you're good to go.
Awesome. Cool. And then the last thing for tonight is the JetBrains raffle. So just get the slide back up. Okay, so we had 8 people who applied to the raffle, and that's how far we're taking it. So if I could get a drum roll from someone who's got a nice bassy desk that can drum roll. There we go. Cool. Your winner is Warren. Warren, yes. I have your email. I will email you a license. You can use it for any JetBrains product. And yeah, if you don't use it for PHP Storm, or if you have PHP Storm already, you can use it for anything else. So yeah, congratulations.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Nice.
And yeah, to everyone else, as I said in the beginning, thanks for coming. Please follow us, PHP_ZA on Twitter. We're on Meetup. I'm on ZATech. Most of us are on ZA Tech, ZA if you didn't come from that site here. A recording of this will be uploaded to YouTube. So this talk will be available for later reference if you had any connection blips or if you want to forward along to somebody you know. So thank you very much for coming. I'm going to stop recording now, and if anyone wants to stay on and chat, they're free to. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.